Greetings, cult members, loyal subscribers, and casual viewers alike. I actually got pretty mad at this one towards the end, so we're just gonna have a little fun at the beginning and read some of the comments from the previous video. Jaina July 2140 says, "This just makes me think that the author was autistic." This is in reference to the list that was written by Doe. I'm assuming it's just by Doe, that we read in the previous video, where a lot of the specific major and minor offenses seem to just be an overlap with these very tiny changes. So I can definitely see where you came with that one, Jaina. This one from the Psycho 420 I really liked. Seems to me this list of rules, specifically the rules surrounding teachers especially, don't question them, breaks the don't be oversensitive rule. Absolutely agree. This actually reminds me of some parts of explaining to new teachers that when a student is asking a question, that is not a anything that you should be taking offensively. I remember there was a teacher who had told the students to do certain steps. And one of the students asked, "Well, I know how to do it a different way. Why do we have to do it the way that you showed? Can't we just do it this other way because this other way is faster?" And that teacher immediately started just yelling, screaming at the student. And I heard about later that day when I talked to the student, they explained, I just asked a question and the teacher started screaming at me. And so, of course, I got upset. So I started yelling, that was wrong, but I did. And then I got detention for disrespectful behavior. I guess I understand I shouldn't have yelled, but I don't understand why the teacher yelled at me to begin with. And I just thought, all right, maybe it's the student just not wanting detention, not wanting to admit what really happened. But when I asked the teacher, that's what happened. And I said, "Why would you yell at the student for asking a question?" And the teacher said, "Well, because they were questioning my authority. They were challenging my authority." And I said, "They're not sitting at your desk attempting to usurp the throne. They're asking a question. And if you can't answer that question, then it makes you have to reconsider why you want them to submit the work done in a certain way. If you just can't answer why not do it a different way, especially if that other way is faster." So this idea of, don't be disrespectful to the teachers, for some reason, that teacher didn't think it also went the other way. Don't be disrespectful to the students. And, if the students are supposed to control themselves while they're in the throes of puberty, as they're all adolescents, even more so, we as adults have to control ourselves when we're talking to these students. So yeah, that's what this reminded me of. Jason Jacoby writes, "Lemony Stardust. I think they needed a list of offenses to make these things more official. Some of them go without saying, some are redundant. People don't need to be told to act right. Be tempered and modest. Seek to be superior to your former self instead of your fellow man. And give each other the benefit of the doubt because nobody is perfect. There's no need to have a separate line about manipulating information or about not starting rumors to create drama. It's like whoever wrote it had the list had to hit a certain word count." As I was reading this just now, it made me think about maybe they didn't have all of these items listed in the past, but then something happened and they thought, all right, I guess we have to spell it out. It reminds me of just some of the rules that we have either for students or for teachers, and how you think, wow, I shouldn't have to say this, and then you do. So for example, there's a rule about fitted clothing. Teachers cannot wear clothing that shows off their figure, like fitted clothing. Obviously, you don't have to walk around in a trash bag, right? But it shouldn't be anything skin tight. And you can't wear leggings as pants. So one of the teachers, actually the same teacher that had the yelling at that student, I mentioned it because I saw when that teacher came to talk to me that the teacher was wearing leggings as pants. And I just mentioned, we can't wear anything form-fitting. You don't have to go leave and change now, but just for future reference. And the teacher said, "Oh, well, I I bought this when I was like 15 kilos lighter, so, these are actually yoga pants." And so I had to say to the teacher, and this is one of those things you really don't think you have to spell out, but I said, I get it, my weight has fluctuated, but you can't wear clothes based on what your body was when you purchased it and how the clothes fit when you purchased it. You have to dress the way that your body is now. So if now these loose yoga pants are fitted leggings, they're fitted leggings. And I mean, how do you say that without insulting somebody's intelligence? So it's time to get into the reading, and it's actually quite long, but it's been a while since I posted a video, so I think I owe you guys a long one, so let's go ahead and get into it. The 88 update was written while we were in seclusion during the first snatching away, and was made public to a minor degree through a mailing to various New Age centers, health food stores, writers, preachers, ufologists, monasteries, and so on. I like how among writers, preachers, ufologists, and New Age centers, it's also health food stores. This really does show the type of people that they were hoping to attract. Beginning in approximately 1986 and continuing throughout this time period, some extremely revealing information was surfacing worldwide. Reports of government cover-ups of UFO crashes, alien technology being acquired and tested by the military, and rumors of underground bases housing joint alien/government projects circulated widely. By the way, when I was in the military, no at all indication of any alien crashes, alien technology. Now, granted, I didn't do a whole lot with intelligence. I was in intelligence. I was billeted for intelligence for a while. There are things that I did find out that I am not allowed to talk about, but yeah, alien technology was not one of them, which was really unfortunate. There was a really cool safe. All the stuff that we want to access, they're all in these gigantic safes. There's these walk-in safes you go into, and inside the safes, this is where you can access this type of internet. It's like a military internet that you have to have at least a certain security clearance to access. So that's in these safes. Alien though. I was hoping for like my Mulder and Scully X-Files moment. And the ADS is the area denial system. It's kind of like a heat ray. So that, and I think what was it called? The Osprey. It's this cool vehicle that it can take off and land like a helicopter, but then once it's in the air, it can rotate the propellers so that way it can have a nice stable flight, and then it can rotate them again. So it's like a helicopter, so it can land and take off vertically. That's probably the closest thing to alien technology that we had. In addition, detailed reports of abductions of humans by space aliens for the purposes of genetic experimentation and hybridization were escalating. It was a particularly accelerated time in our own awakening as well. Missing pieces of the puzzle were being given to us that broadened our overview and helped to clarify some aspects of our own mission. We have no doubt that the timing of these exposures was deliberate and calculated, not only for our own sake, but in preparing the world for events yet to come. Now let's just think about that. This idea that, yeah, our message is space aliens are really God and Jesus and everything that we would consider divine or angelic. They're all space aliens. And now people are starting to think more about aliens. But it's not the same, is it? Because the type of discussions of aliens at this time was very fearful. It was this concept of being abducted against your will, about having medical experimentation done against your will, about having genetic experimentation done or forced pregnancies against your will. This is not really maybe the time that you want to say, oh, yeah, so all of these terrible things that people report happening, those are the Luciferian aliens. Really, there are aliens, but they're good. They're not going to do any of those things that you've heard in the news, okay? Nothing that's showing up in pop culture. That's not the types of aliens we're talking about. I just think it would be a very hard sell. You know what I'm saying? So we get this, I don't know, is it a title page? I don't know what you'd call it. It's not a poster. It just says, it's just this thing that says the UFO 2, 2 witnesses and their crew followers. The way it's written, it looks like it says the UFO 2 and their crew, and then there's a different type of font, 2 witnesses, space question mark, and then on the next line, followers. It's a weird way to present it. A brief synopsis. Now, remember, this synopsis being brief is actually 17 pages. Thankfully, the last 2.5 pages are book recommendations, one of which is the Holy Bible. So maybe we can read some of these. This one, you know, some of these seem pretty interesting. Maybe the cult members, we can build some kind of interesting library, but let's go ahead and dig in. In the early 1970s, 2 members of the Kingdom of Heaven, or what some might call 2 aliens from space, incarnated into 2 unsuspecting humans in Houston, a registered nurse and a college music professor who were in their 40s. The nurse and the professor hadn't previously known each other and had completely separate lives. The registered nurse was happily married with 4 children, worked in a nursery of a local hospital, and enjoyed a small astrology practice. The music professor, a divorcee who had lived with a male friend for some years, was contentedly involved in cultural and academic activities. I wonder, so far it's not saying they met in a mental institution. It's also not saying that Marshall Applewhite, aka Doe, is gay and he hates himself for being gay. This is interesting. For about a year before they met, their lives seemed to encounter severe upheaval and personal confusion, later recognized as the human body's response to the entry of the minds from what the 2 refer to as next level, or the physical level above human. About 9 months after they first met, they left Houston because their lives, which were crumbling around them, made it impossible to concentrate on what was actually happening to them. Yeah, I'm just quickly scanning, but I don't see where they're saying we met in a mental institution and we had this inappropriate relationship where the patient believed that he was some kind of Jesus incarnate in space alien form, having come into his body, which was just a vehicle for the next level above human Jesus, and the nurse encouraged it. That's not in here. Most of their friends and associates thought that the 2 of them had lost their minds or were being duped into a relationship by the other. The only relationship they shared, certainly having no physical attraction towards the other, was the compulsion to discover what had brought them together and what might be their purpose. They don't mention that they had no physical attraction towards each other because Marshall was gay. I don't know why they avoid this. I guess it's not super important, but that for him was this idea that he was sinful, that there was something inherently wrong with him. That was part of what contributed to his mental break that led him to being institutionalized. That's the reason I bring it up. It's not like, oh, well, this nurse and her gay friend. It's that this was very instrumental to what led him to the mental institution where they met, which again, they don't mention that they met in a mental institution. In fact, it doesn't even mention that they met at the hospital. So even with this sanitized version that the nurse is working in the nursery of a local hospital, it doesn't actually mention that they met at the hospital. So even if this was not a mental institution, the idea of a nurse taking up some kind of bizarre relationship with a patient where they run away and abandon their existing lives to go start a new one together, that would definitely be frowned upon, right? Ignoring all the other complicated truths involved. And they just completely avoid it. They don't say where they met. They just said that before they met, things were confusing, and then after they met, they decided to leave Houston together. Interesting. I wonder why they chose to leave all of that out. Most of their friends and associates thought the two of them had lost their minds or were being duped into a relationship by the other. The only relationship they shared, certainly having no physical attraction towards the other, was a compulsion to discover what had brought them together and what might be their purpose. They had little in common other than their strong personal relationships with their Heavenly Father. While spending almost 6 weeks in painful, soul-searching isolation in a Texas hill country ranch house, they began to respond and identify with the more of their next-level mind. They consciously recognized that they were sent from space to do a task that had something to do with the Bible, an updated understanding, and prophecy fulfillment. Having divorced themselves from their human lives, they struggled for some time with the conflicting duality of their bodies, memories, and thought patterns, and their next level identity and purpose. Shortly after their first meeting, even before leaving Houston, they had individually dropped habits such as sex, drinking, and smoking, not for explainable reasons, but simply because they both knew that in their new consciousness would be interfered with if such practices were continued. However, the memory and old programming of their bodies, which they now refer to as their vehicles, had to be kept at bay like an annoying puppy in order to sustain their next level consciousness, which is just their way of saying they still had all their physical urges and they had to somehow prevent them from succumbing to those urges. Leaving the hill country, having left everything behind in Houston, giving it all away, they struck out in their last possession, a little sports car convertible. Well, that's cute. I like this idea. I don't know why. But they're leaving Houston, they're leaving everything. I feel very sorry for T's family, especially her children. But, they're leaving everything behind and just this idea of the backdrop of the dusty road in the southwestern United States, and they're driving off in their little sports car convertible, the two of them believing themselves to be inhabited by space aliens. I don't know, there's something amid all of this chaos, there's something kind of quaint about that in a way. They seem to just go where the spirit led, lacing the country up and down from side to side, as if they were being used as cameras and microphones for the next level. They did odd jobs to sustain travel funds, everything from carving crosses for a little store in Las Vegas where the owner took an extreme interest in them. Well, elaborate on that. That's interesting. To digging septic tank ditches near Savage Rapids on the Rogue River in southern Oregon. Occasionally, when they could find no work, they asked for help from preachers, which was, needless to say, a humbling experience for the both of them. Their sports car died, I don't know why died is in quotation marks, in the front of the Ananda Marga house in Portland, Oregon, where they were invited to stay for a while. Now, if it's in Portland and they put in quotation marks that their car died, I do wonder if their car was stripped. Keep Portland weird, but keep your car together. Their real or more in-depth awakening occurred over several months while camping on the Rogue River near Gold Beach, Oregon. While there, they came to believe that they were the two witnesses mentioned in the book of Revelations. This was extremely difficult for them to accept, for they were both the type who were turned off by people who thought they were reincarnations of Cleopatra or an Egyptian king or biblical character. To have to believe that they were assuming a role that would have caused them to run the other way, had they seen someone else assume it, it was more than hard to digest. There's, and I'm not the only one to point this out, but every time it's a reincarnation, it's never, oh, I was just some woodcutter who died after getting sepsis from a work injury back in the 1200s. There was no manure shoveler who died in childhood. You know what I'm saying? It's just such a strange thing. That every time we get somebody who's reincarnated, it's somebody important. In spite of that difficulty, they felt that they really had no choice but to tell the world what the real kingdom of heaven was, a physical, evolutionary level, instead of some mystical cloud and harp spiritual existence as Lucifer had popularly twisted the scripture quoters to misinterpret. The term evolutionary here does not, this is underlined, does not refer to the theories presented by Darwin, but to a level of life that can be entered only after overcoming or rising above the ways of the human world, and only with the assistance of a member of the heavenly kingdom. They knew that Jesus had come or been sent to share exactly the same truth with those who had eyes to see, but that his body might have been a next level hybrid by means of artificial insemination, offering him more next level capabilities. So this is interesting. This kind of brings us back to this idea of the space aliens abducting humans for the purpose of genetic experimentation. So basically, Mary had this forced impregnation, which is one of the examples that I gave, having not even read through this, which again shows my prophetic powers. I had to pause and let Chunk in the room. He was demanding to be allowed in here, weren't you? He's not as directly talkative as Krampus, his father, but yeah, he lets it be known that he needs attention. Let me see if I can grab him. There we go. Okay. Yes. He is not at all bothered like the other cats are by my makeup. He just demands love. So hopefully he'll be okay sitting in my lap. He's usually all right with this. He really wants to touch the book. Can we not touch the book? Yeah. Can we just not do that? Can we please? Please don't touch the book. All right. Let's try this way. Okay. Okay. Yes, sir. Okay. They knew that Jesus had come or been sent by those sent to share exactly the same truth with those who had eyes to see, but that his next level, okay, this is the one where Mary is artificially inseminated. That's a very nice way to put that. He knew that a boarding pass to his father's kingdom came only after overcoming or hating everything of this world, leaving everything and everybody behind, forsaking mother, father, sister, brother for my sake, and following the example of the lead of an older member, your master, rabbi, or lord. This was exactly the same awareness that the two had come to witness to. They also knew that whoever carries this witness will be hated of men, most of all by the religious who are comfortable in their belief system of all that he did it for us. We just have to believe in him, instead of individually needing to also do as he did. So as far as I understand here, they're expecting that other Christians are really going to hate them for preaching that they basically have to take up their cross and follow them. Now this is not something unique to the Heaven's Gate folk. This is definitely something that is a big criticism of especially evangelical Christians, particularly the ones who follow this prosperity gospel idea that if you show good faith, then you will know that God is blessing you by all of the material goods that you have, all the money that you have a nice house, you have a nice car, you have nice clothes, those types of things. And if you mention to them about Jesus absolutely not saying that you're going to be rich and have luxurious items, and instead that you have to give up everything and follow Jesus and not worry about where your next meal is coming from. Don't worry about collecting money. That it's harder for a rich man to go. What is it? Is it easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter heaven? You remind them of that, and they get all angry and upset and say that I don't understand anything because, of course, I'm an atheist. So I do find it interesting when we do have this overlap of belief from or that some of these Christians are going to criticize them for such and such reason, and that they have a criticism back, right? So I do find it interesting when we have that sort. Okay, Chunk. Oh, his talons, his talons. No, no, not the microphone. All right. Anyway, as I was saying, it is interesting to run into some of the same criticisms that a lot of us atheists have towards the average Christian, or at least a certain type of Christian, and to find out that it's the same criticism that T and Doe also have, or had. They also came to know that the true Antichrist is now here and has taken several faces, one of which is the New Age ye are gods concept, or I have only become aware of my own Christ consciousness within while continuing to practice the ways of the world. They knew that when it becomes time for any individual to enter the kingdom of heaven, he cannot love the Lord his God with all his heart, mind, and soul, and still love his wife, his things, his respectability, his credibility, or even possess any of the things while being taken through the birth canal into the next level, the kingdom of heaven, by one of its members. After awakening to this understanding, their heads were spinning with excitement about what had been shared with them by their heavenly Father, or older member, and yet they were fearful of what they were to do with this information. I do wonder what sort of helped them along. Was it that they weren't eating well enough? Were they accidentally eating some certain types of mushrooms during foraging? It just makes me wonder how they came to the conclusion while they were essentially homeless and jobless, penniless in Portland, Oregon, near Portland, Oregon anyway. How did they both come to this decision that they were the two mentioned in Revelations, and that the one that inhabits them also is the one that inhabited Jesus, that they're related to aliens, that heaven is a physical place in some kind of outer space area, and that Lucifer is another form of aliens that convinced people that heaven is some kind of soul, non-physical place. I mean, just where, how do we get from, oh boy, he found cardboard. Anyway, as I was saying, it's one thing to feel that you're different. It's another thing to come to this very specific conclusion, and I do wonder through which mechanism they arrived at such a conclusion. Their older member helped them realize that the so-called flying saucers, or misappropriately labeled UFOs, were means of transportation and laboratories of the kingdom of heaven, clouds of light, wheels of fire, and that the occupants of these spacecrafts were, for the most part, members of the true heavenly kingdom. For the next part here means that frequently the next level transports lower life forms, or human-like creatures, in their spacecrafts, just as zoologists in the human world transport animal life in their means of transportation. The two were given to understand that these spacecraft occupants were participants in God's creation of the earth, and had been the participants in relating to Abraham, the Israelites, Jesus, and all of our Bible's record of man's association with God. They also understood that this civilization, since Adam's time until now, is just one planting of the earth's true gardeners. Coming to know, or having been given the knowledge of these things and countless more, made their heads reel. What they grew to know seemed to create such a communication gap between them and humans that they began to ask, what are we going to do with this understanding? Everyone will think that we're kooks, or be ready to have us committed if we say anything. Interesting, yeah, you were already committed. Maybe, maybe use that. Maybe use that as your starting point. Perhaps I'm not in my right mind since I already had trouble with this. Now, this is not to shame him for having a mental health crisis. It was the right choice for him to go to a mental hospital. The wrong person is who he met, unfortunately. So when they left Gold Beach after having received an unexpected insurance check from a car accident, they began to wonder even more. Okay, wait. So their car died, and they had an unexpected insurance check from a car accident. So did they get hit by a car Did they steal a car? Did they rent a car? Did their sports car get hit while it was parked because the car had died? Anyway, again, I'm looking at the wrong things, I think. So they began to wander even more. They traveled into Canada and all over the US again, leaving little calling cards on pulpits saying, "The two witnesses are here," and then running before anyone could see them or ask any questions. Again, it gives that sort of silly or quaint kind of visual, doesn't it? These two grown adults. So these people that are they're definitely in my age group, and very likely just from the statistics that I've seen, they're likely in your age group too. These are people in their 40s, and they are going to pulpits. They're like sneaking up, putting these little cards say, and we don't know if they're printed or anything. So for my visual, these are crookedly cut out of paper, perhaps trash paper or pieces of discarded cardboard, handwritten, "The two witnesses are here," and then they drop it on the doorstep of a church or, as they mentioned, the pulpit, and then they run off. It also doesn't, it says running off before anyone could see them or ask any questions. So we do have to assume they sneak into a church when it's closed. They put this, in my mind, handmade, no, I can't even say calling card because it's not to get any kind of contact really. And they put this there just to let them know that we're here, and then they run off as if they're 13-year-olds playing ding dong ditch. And if you live outside of the US, what do you call that? Or do teenagers in your area not do that? You basically ring somebody's doorbell and run away, so the person is annoyed because they had to go answer the door and nobody's there. That's really, and I don't even know if that's an adolescent thing. It's more of a preteen kind of thing. It's just a prank that kids tend to do. And that's what they're doing, except they're leaving these. "The two witnesses are here," little notes. At a New Age Awareness Center, they felt led to share that they were the two witnesses, only to find that the leaders of the center claimed the same title. After this incident, they struggled significantly with whether to continue with this modus operandi. Now, this would maybe have them wondering who's right, because we feel that we are right and that this person is an imposter. But what if that person also feels that they are right? How can we know who is saying something that is true? How do we know that this other person isn't an incarnation of the two witnesses? That we are or are not an incarnation of the two witnesses? Or maybe that none of us here are incarnation of the two witnesses? Did they think about that at all? Or did they just assume, "Oh my goodness, these liars, they're just lying liars who lie. We're the ones that are the real witnesses"? I really wish that we could read something or speak with somebody that had met them, who maybe attended this New Age Awareness Center, wasn't the leader, and was just there. Maybe it was their first day, just they were there to check it out. And then these two people show up and say, "We are the two witnesses spoken about in Revelations." And the people who own the New Age Center say, "Well, that can't be right. We are the two witnesses spoken about in Revelations." And then just whatever happened next. I would love to know what happened next. A woman who had met them in Houston right before they left and with whom they had promised to communicate asked if she could meet up with them, and they agreed. As they traveled here and there, they met her a few times, and she offered the use of her gasoline credit cards. They used the cards for a while until they were informed that the cards had been reported stolen. Oh, by the woman's husband. Okay, that's different. You just imagine the woman like, "Yeah, use these cards," and then reporting them stolen just to get them in trouble for whatever reason. But now it makes me wonder about the conversation. "Hey, honey, all these, you can't be using up this much gas." "What? No, no. In fact, yeah, well, give me your cards, let's go to the bank and sort this out." I can't find my car. Somebody must have stolen it from my wallet. Just that conversation. Oh, so they this is just an experience they say was traumatic. So they used the cards for a while until they were informed that the cards had been reported stolen by the woman's husband, which was a traumatic experience to say the least. Well, they did say the least. They didn't explain how it was traumatic at all. I mean, if they were informed that the cards had been reported stolen by the woman's husband, does that mean that on a call that the woman notified them, yeah, you guys have to stop using those cards. My husband reported them stolen. Did the husband grab the phone from her and say, you two weirdos, I reported them stolen. The cops are going to catch up with you sooner or later. And then he hangs up the phone. Did they find this out because the cards were declined and then the gas station attendant called the police and they were arrested? It really does say the least. In the meantime, the old car they purchased in Portland, Oregon with the money from their pawned jewelry gave up the ghost, and they were stranded in St. Louis on the night that the comet Kohutek was at its peak. Now wait a minute. So they left Oregon with some money that they received from an unexpected insurance check from a car accident. That's when they left Oregon. But now they're saying that they used the money to leave Oregon by purchasing a car with the money from pawned jewelry. So did they get an unexpected insurance check? Did they pawn jewelry? Or was it both? It's also kind of weird that they were giving up their worldly possessions, yet they had lots of jewelry, enough jewelry, or at least enough fine jewelry, that they could afford a used car that was good enough to take them into Canada, back to Houston. This is this is even more confusing than I expected. In their naive trust, they pulled out one of their old credit cards and rented a car, firmly believing that God would provide the means to pay the bill. Notice it says their naive trust. It doesn't call it faith. They call it naive trust. Somewhere later, while in Brownsville, Texas, they made an appointment with a news reporter to share what they had come to know, telling him that this would be the biggest story he had ever received. He believed them, but thought that their story was about drug trafficking and brought hordes of authorities with him to the interview. Now, this is bizarre. Why would he believe, number one, why would he believe it's about drug trafficking? And number two, why would he bring hordes of authorities with him to the interview? Wouldn't that just shut down the interview? So let's say for whatever reason, these two people in their 40s, they tell me we have a story to tell. It's going to be the biggest story of your career. And you as a journalist somehow interpret this as these guys are drug traffickers. I mean, we've seen how Marshall Applewhite talks. Maybe that's why they thought he was on something. I don't know. But for whatever reason, you thought these are going to be some big time drug traffickers that have a really interesting story to tell. So let me go ahead and bring authorities with me so they immediately will not want to speak. Wouldn't you have a cop maybe in the back somewhere, or like a plainclothes police officer, and bring them to the interview and just say, oh yeah, that's my sound guy, or this is my he's just here to, this is my driver, something. And then after the story is told, then the police officer can arrest them or call in for backup or something. Why would you just show up? If I was a major drug trafficker that for some reason wanted to share this information in the local news, I'm not going to talk if the cops show up. This is ridiculous. I apologize if you hear Chunk meowing like crazy. I let him back in. I moved the cardboard. Hopefully he'll be okay. He's a very, very needy child. So they get the authorities. All right. In the process of following them, though the police didn't know why the two were running, they checked out the license of the rented car, which had been reported stolen. Okay. Well, that's I know, it's very terrible, isn't it, Chunk? The two were arrested and then plopped in the county jail. And in brackets it says, for the sake of clarity, we will refer to the female as T and the male as Doe, two names they took some time ago. T was charged with stealing credit cards, the gasoline credit cards that belonged to the husband of the Houston woman. Doe was charged with auto theft, the car that he rented with his last credit card in St. Louis on Christmas night. After a few days, T was sent to a Houston jail where the charges were dropped by the woman's husband. She was released after having spent 30 days in jail. Doe stayed in the Brownsville jail a while longer, and the credit card company dropped the charges related to the rented car. However, the DA's office in St. Louis picked up the charges, and Doe was extradited to St. Louis. After 6 months, his trial came before a judge, and he received a 4-month sentence, which he had already served, plus 2 extra months. At any rate, the experience yielded significant growth for the both of them. Mainly, the isolation yielded Statement 1, the first written statement of their beliefs, which they sent out soon after Doe's release. So, I guess that's probably what they tell themselves about why God would not provide the means to pay the bill, that they needed this solitary time to receive transmission of Statement 1 that they can send out. I wonder if they sent it out or if they kind of dropped it off. Didn't they drop it off? In addition to those, the 2 witnesses were here. They kind of would drop off. Didn't we read that earlier in the book? They were at first horrified at what happened, thinking that a jail record had ruined their mission and that no one would listen to them if their credibility was questionable. Yeah, it's not like Jesus was charged as a criminal or anything. However, they could see that even prior to the jail incident, their stability and credibility was by now unquestionably questionable. So the felon record was taken in stride as assurance that now they couldn't turn back. It might be interesting to note that during Doe's trial, because of the judge's awareness of the peculiar circumstances surrounding the arrest, the judge ordered a psychiatric examination. Although Doe passed it with flying colors, not a 24-hour period slipped by that he didn't question his own sanity. I wonder what Doe told them during this psychic examination or psychiatric examination. Did he explain why they needed to drive all around the country? That they had to share the message of the next level above human? I just think it's very specific phrasing, right? Passed it with flying colors. This is, I mean, unless you're really bragging about something like an actual achievement, to say that you passed a psychiatric examination with flying colors really comes off as an exaggeration. That perhaps it wasn't as credible as the claim tries to be, or that they're trying to add credibility to it, because either you pass a psychiatric examination or you don't, right? It's not one of those things that you can pass with flying colors. It's not a I don't know, a pilot's license or something. This is not something you brag about. So to use this bragging kind of phrasing, this is really framing it that Doe is absolutely, without a doubt, totally, completely sane, and also has always been sane this whole time. That's the implication they're trying to give with this framing. But in reality, it's just perhaps Doe knows what to say because he's already been institutionalized. He knows what not to say, so he also knows what to say. Not to mention that Bonnie Nettles, who is T, was his nurse and may have advised him of things to say and things not to say. We don't know. T worked in a hospital in Houston while Doe was in St. Louis. She spent most of the money she earned during Doe's incarceration on lawyer's fees. The lawyer was supposedly trying to get Doe released, insisting that the case would be thrown out. All he really accomplished was collecting more of T's earnings. Now, wait a minute, it sort of did get thrown out, right? I mean, the judge said, hey, you're sentenced to a 4-month sentence, and I'll credit you with time served. Oh, look at that, you've been held for 6 months. Goodbye. So they kind of did get that done. I don't know why they're being so dismissive of the lawyer. I mean, he's being charged with grand theft auto, and he's just charged with time served. Do you see what I'm saying? That's not that's amazing. That sounds like a pretty good lawyer to me. After Doe's release, he flew to Houston where T was waiting. With what money? What do you think, Chunk? With what money? I don't know where he's going to go. I don't want to start the next... No, you don't want to go there. There's a bunch of papers. That's not stable. That's not stable. All right. Doe's public defender had cautioned her not to... Okay, Doe's public defender had cautioned her, being T, not referring her to Doe, not to go to St. Louis for fear that her presence would complicate the trial. By now, she had barely saved enough to purchase a very used old model car and some camping gear. The very weary, well, and also a plane ticket, right? I mean, how did he fly to Houston? Where is this money coming from? She wasted all the money on this lawyer, apparently, and then spent the remainder on a car, a used car with some camping gear. Where did they get this money to fly? Did he take it out on another credit card? The very weary and somewhat scared two struck out again with a new down-to-earth modus operandi. Take no chances. This too reminded them that credit and credit cards are not the ways of the next level, but rather some of Lucy's, and then it says in parentheses, Lucifer's way of guaranteeing your service to his world. Why would they call Lucifer Lucy? Why would they give him a cutesy nickname? Just say Lucifer. What's wrong with Lucifer? This is a Luciferian system. Why call it, haha, yeah, that old Lucy? Ridiculous. Just me and my bestie Lucy. They then headed for California, where the mother of the Houston woman offered her help in whatever seemed to be the next step. Whoever this Houston woman is, she is a real friend, honestly. Even after they get arrested, to try to make it right because of the issue that happened with their husband, getting them arrested, she's still saying, hey, so these people that they're going around and they think they are inhabited by the souls of aliens. Mom, can you let them stay with you? That's something. That's something. Statement 1, written while Doe was in jail, was then mailed out in March 1975 from Ohio, where they stayed only for a few days. They sent statements to ministers, evangelists, and awareness centers far and wide. It read thusly. You know, I just put him out and he wants back in. He is so hard to please, Mr. Chunk. I gave Chunk some catnip. Let's hope that he just handles it. Just hangs out. All right, so this is statement 1, and this is already written in this 2 columns per page format, and for some reason they decided to go from, I don't know, size 12 font to size 9? What the hell? This is Lucy's work, apparently. All right, what religions have sought to understand since the beginning of their origin is what is above the human level of existence. Most have taught that if an individual lives a good life, adoring some savior, that he will inherit some heaven after his death. Only if it were that simple. Oh wait, this is the caterpillar thing. Okay, we don't need to read this. If you didn't watch the previous video, this is basically about he creates this very bizarre analogy about a caterpillar. I'll just read it. That it is as inaccurate as a caterpillar believing that if he dies a good caterpillar, he will mysteriously awaken in a rose blossom and live there forever with the king butterfly. And then it talks about how he must become the butterfly, and that part kind of makes sense, and then the rest of it really, really doesn't. Is this the entire thing, though? Let me check. It is. It's the same thing. Within 2 or 3 days, a man who headed an awareness group in Los Angeles came with one of his students to Ohio to meet with the two. After deciding that they were seemingly sane, he invited them to speak in the house of another one of his students. I think we read this part already as well. The group leader invited all of his students, plus anyone else that he thought might be interested, and the house was packed. The two did the best they could to explain Statement 1. At the end of the meeting, they said that if they were... I had to pause because I felt like we read this before, and no, I didn't go back. I did continue off where the previous where we previously left off. I don't, yeah, okay. I don't know, it just seems very redundant. At the end of the meeting, they said that if there were some who wanted to know more, we could meet at Frank's house the next night. And then this next paragraph is in brackets. We'll call the leader Frank, which wasn't his name. Our reasons for not using the human birth names of the two, or of anyone else for that matter, are to protect their families and loved ones from unnecessary grief, and in order to not toot our own horn, though some might interpret our not using them as some indication that we must have something to hide. Of course, the press in the past has seen to it that the details that might hurt innocent loved ones were filled in, as they likely will do again. Now, I do agree with them. I also think, yeah, they do have something to hide. It's pretty obvious that they're trying to hide the identities of these individuals, and I think that it was really not a good choice by any of the journalists to use those people's real names. The next night at Frank's place, several dozen showed up and remained thirsty for even more information. T and Doe then began to meet with them individually, and before realizing what was happening, T and Doe said to some, well, if you're really serious about knowing more, wrap up your loose ends and meet us in the campground in Gold Beach, Oregon this weekend, or within the next few days. They thought that this would weed out most of the curious, not realizing that this was adding up to followers, a big surprise, and an idea not too welcome as far as T and Doe were concerned. I mean, what did you think would happen? How did you not think I mean, even if it's to weed out most of the curious, you're still allowing for some of them to become followers. So why are you surprised that followers are happening? The Gold Beach campground classroom turned out to be something else. I don't know why classroom and something else are in quotation marks. Not only did many of the ones from the Los Angeles meeting show up, but so did some of their friends. Even some hippies seemed to be coming out of the woodwork, although no publicity had come out yet. By this time, someone had asked, "What shall we call you?" And the two answered Bo and Peep, since it looks like we're gathering our lost sheep. And then in brackets it says, even though those names stuck for the next year while the meetings were being held around the country, we'll continue to use T and Doe since these names have remained until the present time. For a week or so, T and Doe held constant meetings, both with the individuals as a whole and privately with individuals. The followers, or rather those T and Doe insisted on calling students, dispersed to hold smaller, separate meetings, and later rejoined in a campground near Redwood City, California. From there, the students held a meeting at Stanford University in Palo Alto, California on August 13th, 1975. Posters were then printed for the August 24th meeting in Cañada College, where T and Doe made their first public appearance. The crowd was so large that the auditorium was filled to capacity for two back-to-back meetings. That poster reads as follows, and this was from a previous video as well. It just says UFOs, why they're here, who they've come for, when they're leaving, and this is not a discussion of UFO sightings or phenomena, and it basically just explains who the two are, or who they claim to be. T and Doe were never pleased with having to use the term UFO because they felt like spacecraft and other flying devices of the next level were a lot closer to proper descriptions. At Waldport, Oregon, a Waldport, Oregon meeting held on September 14th, 1975, was the first meeting to be significantly picked up by the press, as were stories relating to how some people had given away their children and properties. Such actions were certainly not according to T and Doe's instructions. Nevertheless, Bedlam had broken out by now. A few stayed behind in Oregon for a follow-up meeting, while the rest proceeded with T and Doe via campgrounds to a Denver meeting, and then onto a campground near Chicago. While they were in Chicago, the news broke about the Waldport meeting, and because of the above reports and rumors, a couple of sheriff's duties from Lincoln County, Oregon were sent to investigate what was going on. After leaving Illinois and arriving at campground outside Tulsa, T and Doe thought it seemed wise to break up into a number of smaller groups, not only because of the interruptions of authorities, but also because the numbers were getting too big for the campgrounds to handle. I do wonder, because it doesn't mention exactly how big, but I wonder how many people they had at this point. Certain ones who seemed to have a grasp of the information were sent to hold their own meetings across the country. A system of communication was set up according to places, dates, and hours in order for T and Do to be somewhat informed. Statement 1 had grown into statements 2 and 3, plus a prospective candidate letter. Students were sent out in partnerships of 2 or 3 if an odd number made it necessary. Each group had its own purser who kept track of funds and doled them out according to need in an effort to maintain some kind of order and fairness. Why not just call him a treasurer? Over the next few months, too many things happened to mention, but a few of them. The National Enquirer interviewed T and Do, and the New York Times Sunday magazine did a cover story on them. Let's see if we can find that one from the National Enquirer. That's interesting. Unfortunately, I could not find the National Enquirer article. So the New York Times did a cover story on them. T and Do's message was the same as Jesus' message, telling about what the true kingdom of heaven is and how individuals who want to be candidates for its membership must overcome all of their human addictions, drop their human ways, and look to a member of that kingdom for all their needs. Do realized more and more that T was definitely more advanced, or older, member of the next level than was he. Periodically, almost magically, the group was able to rendezvous with their teachers. By now, the ones who had stuck it out through difficult, humbling lessons were a wide variety of people. Some examples were a nurse, a doctor's wife, a rancher, a real estate broker, an actor, an artist, a film editor, a technical writer, a computer programmer, a bartender, an environmentalist, and many college and post-grad students. Because of the requirements of membership, some who joined the group as couples now became friends and fellow students. When some fell away, occasionally they felt bitterness because of their choice to rebuild burnt bridges. I mean, that must be really difficult, right? Can you imagine joining this group, burning those bridges, and then coming out of it? That must be really hard, especially in that case about the children that were left. We talked about that in a previous video. One of the hardest things that T and Do had to do concerned the demonstration referred to in Statement 1. The students had been told that while they were out holding meetings, they would hear of the demonstration, and that would be the signal to stop holding meetings and come running. It was rumored for a while that the demonstration was going to happen in San Francisco. T and Do were in Las Vegas when the TV network news programs all broke the story about the two. Now, because of the kind of publicity that had come out across the country, climaxed by the networks, T and Do felt that further meetings were pretty hopeless, and people had already made up their minds about how ridiculous this all was. T and Do felt that the demonstration was the one thing that could change that. However, they grieved literally for days, feeling like they had been shot down by the media and the mission was dead. Again, so they believe all of this is going according to plan. They believe that God is going to prepare them and take care of everything. And then, oh no, the news got in the way. That's something nobody could have predicted. The whole thing is ruined. I mean, they were arrested. And out of that arrest came Statement 1. And they're still going to have this woe is me, this doesn't seem like it's ever going to work out kind of lamentation. They received instruction to not walk into a physical demonstration, but rather to know that the killing in the street of the two witnesses had occurred at the hands of the media. Oh, come on. Come on. What a cop-out. Oh my gosh, what a cop-out. If you don't remember, or if you didn't watch the previous video, this demonstration they do comes from Revelations, where basically they are going to be killed in the street and then left there. For whatever reason, they're just left in the street. And then after 3 days, they're going to resurrect. And that's this demonstration. This shows that they are the ones promised in Revelation because they will resurrect just like Jesus resurrected. And their followers are waiting. They're waiting for this to happen. T and Do, they're waiting for the news of when this is going to happen, when they're going to go out with a bang. And instead, they change it to we were murdered by the media, and from those ashes like the phoenix we shall rise. Oh, come on. What a cop-out. You know, I was wondering how they were going to get out of that. This idea that they're going to have this major demonstration. Well, and it looks like this is what happened. However, they felt like this was a cop-out or chickening out interpretation of the one act that was supposed to be the basis for their whole following. Okay, so even they understood that was a cop-out. So, with much embarrassment, they called their students together, convinced that without a physical demonstration, their students would have every right to call them charlatans. Okay, so they get it. Much to their surprise, the students, almost without exception, accepted the interpretation and said, okay, then where do we go from here? Wait a minute. So they told their groups, because they have all these groups around the country, they told them the demonstration has happened. We have been killed in the streets, metaphorically, by the media. And when they told them that, T and Do had this argument or this feeling inside that, gosh, nobody's going to accept that. They're going to think that we're a bunch of charlatans. They need a real physical demonstration. I mean, in the Bible, it doesn't say that they were assassinated by the media. It says they were shot, left dead in the street, and 3 days later, they physically resurrected. Certainly, our followers are not going to accept this BS interpretation of being assassinated by the media. And as they're thinking about, all right, well, we'll have to figure something out. Their response from the students, almost unanimously, is to just accept this nonsense interpretation and, all right, well, where do we go from here? Now, this is interesting because I think it's really telling, and I don't think whoever wrote this understood how telling it was, that T and Do doubted their own interpretation of this. And they thought, there is no way anyone is going to believe this. We have to demonstrate something. We can't just interpret it as some kind of metaphor. We have to actually die in the street. And then when their students said, no, we'll accept this thing that you told us, now what? Instead of them responding honestly and saying, it would be easier to just interpret what this meant, that we were killed in the street by the media, but we feel like we really have to give you a physical demonstration to show without the shadow of a doubt we are the two that is mentioned in Revelation. They don't do that. Instead, they just let them accept what T and Do know is a BS metaphorical interpretation. This really says it was founded on what they knew to be a lie. I think that maybe they could convince themselves that because their members believed it, that meant that they interpreted it correctly. But this whole time, I was kind of operating under the idea that T and Do, with at the very least, Do, really, really, really believed this. And now I mean, I guess you can kind of have it both ways, right? You can say, we're going to interpret this very liberally, so that way I don't have to physically die. I mean, I put my trust in God that he would take care of my credit cards, and instead I ended up in jail. So, what if I put my trust in God again and then I just die, right? So you have this idea of, I'll just go with it. I still think that T and Do, definitely Do, still believed it. But I think there must have been some kind of mental gymnastics that went on for them to say, yeah, nobody's going to buy this BS interpretation. And then when their students bought it, they said, oh, I guess we interpreted it correctly, right? I guess we know more than we thought. It's just such a strange one. What do you think happened? Like, what do you think was the conversation after the students responded to T and Do and said, yeah, okay, so now what? What do you think T and Do said to each other? T and Do still felt that to continue was probably one of their greatest tests. Why? Why would they feel that? Their students are totally on board. Why would they feel like, oh, now it's really hard for us to keep progressing? Why? You just had your students pass their test of believing any BS that comes out of your mouth. Nevertheless, they got up, kicked the dust off their tired feet, and continued with the instruction to hold meetings a while longer. They then became more organized in their groups and more systematic with their communication between cities. All in all, the meetings continued for a little over 10 months. Notice that they phrase this. got up and kicked the dust off their tired feet, and they continued with the instruction to hold meetings a while longer. All they did was just continue doing what they were doing this whole time. The only difference is, uh, what, if they were seen at a place by people that somebody might say, "Hey, I read about you guys in the National Enquirer. Oh, you guys are the UFO gods people." Ha ha ha. That's really the only difference. At a meeting in a Manhattan, Kansas college auditorium, April 21st, 1976, T announced that the harvest is closed. There will be no more meetings. Since that time, no new students have been admitted to the class. The students were called together for a few months later in Medicine Bow National Forest, Wyoming, to receive instruction on what was next. There were close to 100 who showed up. T and Doe announced that they had been rumored that some people were still occasionally indulging in pot and sex. Everyone was asked to go off by themselves for a few hours and make up their mind as to whether they were just caught up in the fun of a movement or if they were serious. For now, the real classroom was to begin, and it was not for those who felt that they wanted to hold on to human ways. T and Doe preached long and hard about what it meant to rid oneself of self and what would be required of those who continued. Within the next few days, the class dropped to fewer than 80. This was in early July, and by October, when the snows ran them out of Medicine Bow, the class had dwindled down to fewer than 70. For the next 2 years, the class spent summers in the Rocky Mountains campgrounds and on ranches, and the winters in the Sun Belt, also in campgrounds and on ranches. They experimented in all kinds of disciplines, such as wearing hoods and learning about the conning ways of their visual personalities. The conning. Why is that in quotes? The conning. Not the cunning, the conning. I mean, that's a very uh, that's very on the nose, isn't it? That they were deliberately trying to con others and making 12-minute checks, each person physically going to a given spot every 12 minutes to concentrate on his or her desire to serve. They were then given new names with 3 letters in the first syllable and a common 2-syllable second part. So this would be like Genodi, for example, and Soroti. Later, after their numbers had diminished significantly, they moved into houses, sometimes large houses, sometimes a number of smaller houses, usually moving every 6 months to a year. For a time, they lived on the trust fund of one of the students, but for the most part, supported themselves by, as many as needed, taking jobs outside of the classroom. At present, members of the class are living in 6 groups of varying members in 6 different states and 10 different houses or apartments. All in all, the students have been in the classroom 12 years now, and their numbers are down to a few dozen. Time and again, they were encouraged by T and Doe to leave the classroom if they had the least desire for anything in the world, or if the classroom wasn't what they really wanted. They visited families occasionally to assure them that they were doing what they wanted to do and that they had in no way been duped. Yeah, just conning, but they're not duped. They had plenty of breeding material, watched TV, attended movies, visited churches, and attended lectures whenever they were interesting. The important thing is not where they have been or for how long, but what they have learned or awakened to know. Over the years, not only T and Doe, but their students as well, tried again and again to refute this information. They tried to ignore it and deny it. They tried to play out what they would do if they went back into the world, but they kept coming back to the fact that this knowledge and concept was the only thing that made sense to them. Well, I mean, they've really dedicated a lot of their life. As it mentions that some of the people who left the groups early on had already had a very difficult time because they had burnt bridges, and they were angry at the group because they felt pressured to do so, or that when they did it, they weren't met with some kind of amazing revelation, but for whatever reason, they thought the group wasn't what it was claiming to be. So by this time, after several months, this looks like much more than a year, how could they then say, you know what, this isn't what I want? This is similar to, I would say, any religious belief that you want to believe it because it's all you know. For these guys, it's not all they know, but it's really what they've dedicated themselves to for the past however long. And in doing so, they've really separated themselves from the rest of the world. It kind of reminds me about this concept of living English. It's when the Amish, they turn 18 and they can go out into the regular world and experience it. And that they're supposed to, at that moment, decide, do I want to now stay away from my friends and family, my community forever? Or do I want to go back and live among my people? And I really don't think that's a fair choice. Do I want to go be connected to a society I barely know and cut off from everything I know? Or do I want to go back into my entire worldview and separate myself from this other world that I'm not really interested well, I'm interested in it, but I don't really have a lot of knowledge about it. It's not an informed choice, and I really think it's unfair. But for these guys, I think it's a little different. They're fully grown adults. Some of them have left relationships, long-term relationships. They've left their jobs. How are you supposed to explain this gap in employment if you're a nurse or a real estate broker or a computer programmer that you left to go live among tea and dough for 12 years now? I mean, that's what it says, 12 years now. So it's not just a couple years. I mean, how is it really fair to say that they're truly testing the veracity of their beliefs? I mean, they were told that the two would literally be killed in the street. They would be left there for whatever reason for 3 days and then be resurrected physically. And they just accepted this, oh yeah, we're killed by the media. These are not a group of people that are really rigorously testing. They're more leaning towards, I want to believe that it's true. It would have been a lot easier to just walk away than do all that was required. Really? They've been with you for 12 years. They've separated from the world. It would be easier to rejoin the world 12 years later than to do all that was required, which is now their day-to-day routine. Come on. There are even some who are now out of the class, who have been in the class for some time, who still believe this information to be true. Well, that's a nice claim, but we don't have any evidence of that. I mean, if they believe it's true, then why did they leave? That's like saying, oh, well, you're an atheist, but you still believe in God. If I still believed in God, then why would I be an atheist? The class knows that the world sees them as a cult, and that no longer bothers them. They know that all they care about is the next level, the kingdom of heaven, and how they might become better members of that kingdom. Prior to 1981, their understanding was that they were working toward graduation from the human kingdom into the next level, and that this graduation process involved physically changing over their human vehicles, metamorphosing into new or next level vehicles. They now believe that in reality, they were in the kingdom of heaven before entering these human bodies, but because of the present awareness of their next level consciousness, they now know that they are in that kingdom now, though occupying human vehicles in order to do a task. What? So they used to believe they had to physically change their bodies from human to next level, but now they think that they're being basically remotely piloted, that the people in the next level above human are piloting their bodies in order to do a task. All right. In spite of all the repeated effort to refute this explanation, all things continue to lead them to believe the following. And it says, hold on to your hats, exclamation. All right. Let's prevent our wig from being snatched off. Are you ready, Chunk? Okay. They were briefed as a crew aboard a spacecraft about how they would incarnate into human vehicles in order to do a task. They left their kingdom world and came into this world beginning in the late 1940s. They feel that some left their next level bodies via so-called UFO crashes. However, they believe that the crashes were not accidental, as they appeared to be to the humans who witnessed the remains and recovered some of the bodies. These are now in the possession of the governments. One of our government's scientists coined the term EBE, or extraterrestrial biological entities, To identify these beings, also frequently referred to as the Greys. Some left their bodies behind in cold storage or the next level's wardrobe for the duration of this task. Others were in spirit, having not yet earned next level bodies since having left the human kingdom. If this hypothesis is true, then the class members were not humans recruited by T and O into some cult, but rather were members of the next level before ever meeting them. Well, then what's the point? Right? What's the point? So they're in the next level. They all know each other. They're all already members of the next level in some capacity. And then they all meet up again in human bodies. To what end? Especially since they've closed any registration. What's the point? They knew prior to coming to Earth that two older members would take them through a lengthy, according to human time, observation study time in this world in preparation for choosing and taking a human vehicle before actually entering it. That is to say, they were all in spirit from the late 1940s and possibly early 1950s until the mid 1970s, before actually entering and taking charge of the human vehicles or human bodies that they're now in. The vehicles they chose generally ranged in age from early 20s to late 50s, some having more difficult genetic packages or programming in order to give more growth opportunity. That's a very nice way to say they're disabled. The tasks seem to include the important aspect of example. They incarnated into such a variety of human vehicles that collectively they covered the 360-degree range of humanness and human addictions. Really? So this ragtag group of a few dozen encompasses fully the entire spectrum of the human existence. Oh, come on. They then, during the classroom, overcame the world or changed the programming of these vehicles sufficiently to demonstrate that virginity can be recovered, or that you can do as Jesus admonished his disciples to do. Was this not more realistic, a metamorphosis? This is not to say that it took 12 years to do this, for many other lessons and much broader understanding filled the bulk of these years. The pieces of the puzzle seem to indicate that the reason the Bible and its role players tend to overcome human ways is not for the sake of morality or pseudo-piety, but simply because the next level literally has no place for those activities. For example, there are apparently no active reproductive organs in the physical bodies of the members of the next level, though the bodies of some of the younger or less advanced members of the next level, if examined, might show signs of internal remnants of reproductive organs long since all but atrophied. And there's a footnote here. Leonard H. Stringfield, UFO Crash Retrieval Syndrome, Status Report 2, News Sources, New Data, Mutual UFO Network 1980, Case A7, pages 10 to 11. I don't know. Let's see if we can find it. Okay. Here it is. Case A7. This entry concerns the medical phase of my inquiry into the study of alien occupants allegedly recovered from crashes of their vehicles. My first meeting with a prime medical contact came in June 1978 while working on my first paper for release in Dayton, Ohio. It was arranged by a veteran researcher of long acquaintance who was aware of my quest for UFO crash or retrieval information. He also knew that I had acquired certain basic pathological information from other sources. Over our dinner, what is this? What's his name? Not Norm MacDonald, Norm Geisler. Got another one about, oh, somebody I knew met me for dinner, just believe it. Wish it was Norm MacDonald. Over our dinner, information from the doctor who served on the staff of a major hospital. This is such a Norm thing to say. Came slowly and cautiously as expected. He made references to a colleague who performed an autopsy on an alien body in the early 1950s, but in the main, not much new data were revealed beyond general exterior anatomy. Significant, however, was that certain characteristics, some ambiguously described by other sources, were surprisingly corroborated. Of course, I asked many questions. Most were unanswered. Later that evening, I met my informant's charming wife, and we all agreed that our subject was not only bizarre, but almost too incredible for the general public's acceptance. Departing, the doctor was agreeable to further meetings. Communications continued, also a developing mutual trust in our exchange of information. The doctor's next move was for us to enjoin privately in Dayton, followed by my scheduled talk. I met him briefly in the lobby of the convention center before the program commenced and agreed to rejoin him at a certain time in my room at the Stouffer's Inn. However, because of an intervention of the threats, which caused a sudden shift in my room for my safety, he was unable to reach me. I later learned that even his note that had pushed under the door of my former room went mysteriously astray. What do you mean mysteriously? Some note goes into a room, nobody's in there. It was probably thrown away by one of the workers, or if the note was pushed under the door and now a new occupant is in that room, that person probably just tossed it as well. Oh, maybe they meant this for somebody else or something and just tossed it mysteriously astray. It seems the new occupant, seemingly distressed by the transfer, could have notified the hotel of the note, and they in turn could have made an attempt to reach me in the room to which I had been reassigned. But the Dayton affair was full of mysteries that may go forever unexplained. That is not that person's job. That person found a weird piece of paper on the floor. They looked at it and thought, oh, I guess housekeeping missed this one, crumpled it, and threw it in the trash. They're not going to say, golly, I wonder if could it be? Could it be that the previous occupant of the room was moved into another room for their safety, and then I was assigned this room later? And perhaps this piece of paper was supposed to go to the previous occupant of the room, who is still in the hotel somewhere. I better take this directly to the lobby. They're not going to have that thought process. They're going to think this is a piece of paper somebody dropped, housekeeping missed it, trash. Mysterious. Soon, normal liaison with the doctor resumed. In time, as new information relative to UFO crashes reached me from several new sources, so did vital new data about the aliens' physiology. Emerging was a new source, a noted doctor who was willing to receive and answer some of my questions, but apparently not willing to be named. I was to know him as a specialist who, in his area of expertise, had performed an autopsy on an alien in the early 1950s. What area of expertise is it to perform an autopsy on an alien? Who they open up the phone book and say, "Oh, perfect, alien autopsy specialist. That's who we need. Let's give him a call." From him, in time, I was able to envision the body entire. And the more I learned of its internal chemistry and some of its organs, or by human equation, the lack of them, I realized that our captured mortal member of the universe was beyond the limits of my non-professional evaluation. It's probably the most accurate statement that I've read so far from this case A7. During 1979, my sole objective in UFO research has been to release newly acquired data concerning whatever is obtainable from creditable sources about the continuing study of the recovered alien bodies. In the main, it has come from the medical people. It is, therefore, important in this paper to first review the general data I have correlated collectively from several sources in the compendium that follows. They're not numbered, but I'll just say number 1, 2, and 3. So, number 1, the approximate height of the alien humanoid is 3.5 to 4.5 feet tall. One source approximated 5 feet. The weight is approximately 40 pounds. Number 2, 2 round eyes without pupils. Under heavy brow ridge, eyes described variously as large, almond-shaped, elongated, sunken, or deep-set, far apart, slightly slanted, appearing oriental or mongoloid. And of course, we mean that in an anthropological sense. Number 3, the head, by human standards, is large when compared with the size of the torso and limbs. Take a look at a 5-month human fetus, I was told. Number 4, no earlobes or protrusive flesh extending beyond appenditures on each side of the head. Number 5, nose is vague. 2 nares are indicated with only a slight protuberance. Number 6, mouth is indicated as a small slit without lips, opening into a small cavity. Mouth appears not to function as a means of communication or as an orifice for food ingestion. Number 7, neck described as being thin, and in some instances not being visible because of a garment on that section of the body. So I guess Marine Corps and leathernecks. Number 8, Most observers described the head of the humanoids as hairless. One said that it showed a slight fuzz. Bodies are described as hairless. Number 9. Small and thin fits the general description of the torso. In most instances, the body was observed wearing a metallic but flexible garment. Number 10. Arms are described long and thin, reaching down to the knee section. Number 11. One type of hand has 4 fingers and no thumb. 2 fingers appear longer than the others. Some observers have seen fingernails, others without. A slight webbing effect between fingers was noted by 3 authoritative observers. See attachment 3. I wonder if we'll get to that. Other reports indicate types with less than 4 fingers. Number 12. Legs short and thin. Feet of one type described as having no toes. Most observers describe feet as covered. One source said the foot looked like an orangutan's. Number 13. Skin description is not green. Not is in all caps. Some claim beige, tan, brown, or tannish or pinkish gray, and one said it almost looked like a bluish gray under deep freeze lights. In 2 instances, the bodies were charred to a dark brown. The texture is described as scaly or reptilian, and as stretchable, elastic, or mobile over smooth muscle or skeletal tissue. No striated muscle, no perspiration, no body odor. Number 14, no teeth. Number 15, no apparent reproductive organs. I guess this is the part that is being cited. Perhaps atrophied by evolutionary degeneration. No genitalia. In all non-professional judgment, the absence of sexual organs suggests that some of the aliens, and perhaps all, do not reproduce as do the Homo sapiens, or that some of the bodies that are studied are produced perhaps by a system of cloning or other unknown means. Number 15. To most observers, the humanoids appear to be formed out of a mold or sharing identical facial characteristics. Number 16. Brain and its capacity unknown. 17. Colorless liquid prevalent on the body without red cells. No lymphocytes, not a carrier of oxygen. No food or water intake is known. No food found aboard craft is in one known retrieval. No digestive system or GI tract. No intestinal or alimentary canal or rectal area described. And number 18, more than one humanoid type. Lifespan unknown. Descriptive variations of anatomy may be no more diverse than those known among Earth's Homo sapiens. Other recovered alien types of human or grotesque configurations are unknown to me, origin unknown. After several months of negotiation with my major medical sources, hoping to get more specific physiological data, I received the following typewritten statement, blah, blah, blah. So it just kind of goes on from here. I mean, we may as well read it, right? I mean, how often do we get to read cases of UFOs? Which we might want to do, you know? This seems a lot more interesting than the Quran, you know? All right. It's from a doctor who performed the autopsy in the early 1950s. Size. The specimen observed was 4 foot 3 3/8 inches in length. I can't remember the weight. It has been so long and my files do not contain the weight. I recall the length well because we had a disagreement and everyone took their turn at measuring. Head. Well, why would you have a disagreement and everybody has to measure it? What a weird... What? I mean, how many times have you been measured for your height because everyone in attendance at the medical facility disagreed? You just, right, measure twice, cut once. I guess that's the same for the autopsy. Head. The head was pear-shaped in appearance and oversized by human standards for the body. The eyes were mongoloid in appearance. The ends of the eyes furthest from the nasal cavity slanted upward at about a 10-degree angle. The eyes were recessed into the head. There seemed to be no visible eyelids, only what seemed like a fold. The nose consisted of a small fold-like protrusion above the nasal orifices. The mouth seemed to be a wrinkle-like fold. There were no human-type lips as such, just a slit that opened into an oral cavity about 2 inches deep. A membrane along the rear of the cavity separated from what would be the digestive tract. The tongue seemed to be atrophied into almost a membrane. No teeth were observed. X-rays revealed a maxilla and mandible, as well as a cranial bone structure. The outer ear lobes didn't exist. The auditory orifices present were similar to our middle and inner ear canals. The head contained no hair follicles. The skin seemed grayish in color and seemed mobile when moved. The above observation are from general anatomical observations. I didn't autopsy or study the head portion in any great detail since this was not my area of specialty. Note, your drawing of the head should have cheekbones removed or a smoother contour. The eyes in the nasal cavity are not right. The recess and fold is continuous across the forehead. The neck seems too long, but the shoulders do not slope as prominently. This may give you this effect. The arms are oversized in length by human standards. There was no thumb. The index finger in your drawing is longer than the middle finger. I don't believe this is correct, but my memory is hazy at this point. The chest area contained what seemed like two atrophied mammary gland nipples. The sexual organs were atrophied. Some other investigators have observed female specimens. I have not had this opportunity. The legs were short and thin. The feet did not show any toes. The skin covered the foot in such a way that it gave the appearance of wearing a sock. However, X-ray examination showed normal bone structure underneath. And then comment, I guess this is from the author, Leonard H. Stringfield. The statement received from the doctor, which I had requested for this paper, is indeed a breakthrough. Knowing the doctor's area of medical expertise, well, are you going to tell us the doctor's area of medical expertise? We know it's something related to autopsies. Maybe. Definitely nothing with the head. That's it. Knowing the doctor's area of medical expertise and the hospital in which he continues his specialized work, which is also unnamed, it is my belief that his claim to having conducted an autopsy is true. Wait, what? So because the author knows the doctor's area of expertise and knows where the doctor works, therefore this person absolutely did an autopsy 20 or 30 years prior on an alien? That's a lot of faith this person's putting in here. Knowledgeable of other activity at the medical center, plus his comments relative to a specific study, I hasten to say that I can find no hints or obvious loose ends that would indicate a hoax. What about just a lie? How about that? Moreover, some of his information he had related in the past year, not included in his statement, was corroborated by another source, also a doctor. Although this latter source is secondhand, the information shared contains an important detail about a skin characteristic. Well, I mean, this at this time was something that other people were getting interested in. Somebody can have fake memories, or they can just want attention. I mean, we know those things can happen. Why not default to it's more likely to be the case instead of it's more likely that they really did perform an autopsy on an extraterrestrial being? Noteworthy is that many questions asked of my medical person have gone unanswered. It took several months, for some unknown reason, to get his response to describe the alien's foot. When it came to me through his colleagues prior to his written statement, he said that there were no distinct toes, instead a fusion of small bones and indicated evolutionary degeneration. Later, when I pointed out that distinct toes had been mentioned in a report from another source, he checked with a colleague and got the confirmation. There are more than one type, he said. Wow, okay, so that's his answer. It's not, hey, so the one that I looked at was this way, but there are others. It's only after he was pushed that this description of the foot does not match this other thing I've heard. Then the doctor says, well, I mean, there's more than one. All right. Significant, too, is that still another of my sources, the Air Force major, see case A4, told me that one body he had seen had toes like an orangutan. Also relative to the foot, when I asked Robert Barry for information about the foot from his former CIA source, I was told that he was unable to disclose that detail. Later, when I learned about this detail from my medical source, Barry was unable to confirm it. Okay, so this seems like the medical source is less credible. Getting information about the brain, if any exists as we know it, is without results. No one seems to know. My medical source either doesn't know or is reluctant to comment. Other specific questions about the alien's internal organs or specific details about its circulatory or reproductive systems, etc., are also circumvented. One exception, however, to a question I had relative to a device allegedly worn by some of the recovered alien entities concerned a so-called headband. Originally, I heard of it from a former NASA source as a translator used to communicate in all languages with people on Earth. The source, known through a technical person at Bell Laboratories, would not come forward for an interview. Barry's source referred to it as a transceiver, adding cryptically that it was used in the projection of brain waves. One sample of the band, he said, was procured in the 1962 crash and has since been analyzed and developed by the Air Force in an attempt to talk them down into landing, them being UFOs. Finally, on this perplexing issue, I asked my medical source if such a gadget existed. In time, I learned he was aware of it, but had not seen it. He offered no details. Of course, in research, it is known that a headband or similar unit worn on the chest or waist is described during encounters with live entities. Photographs showing the deceased humanoids have been seen by my medical sources. In these, a metallic one-piece suit is worn. Also, my first paper, a statement, was reviewed from Ted Phillips, a prominent MUFON and CUFOS researcher specializing in investigation of physical traces at UFO landing sites, which states that he was privileged to have seen a photo showing the entire body. At a meeting in New York during our visit to the United Nations. Okay, that's not a misread. With doctors Hynek, Saunders, Valley, Poher, and Gordon Cooper, and Lee Spiegel to present the UFO problem to the Secretary General Kurt Waldheim. He told me that he was shocked when he saw my drawing of the alien hand. It was strikingly similar to the hand that he had seen in the photograph. See attachment 3. My close relationship with medical people continues at this writing. I've submitted 4 different drawings of the entire body to my foremost medical source based on his comments and conformity to data supplied by others. Why doesn't the medical source just sketch it up for you? Why is he describing it and then having you draw it and then you send it back and say, is this right? And he says, the index finger's too long. Try again. Why not just have the doctor sketch it? Attaches my final rendition, which includes the doctor's recommended changes received on October 29th, 1979. Also attached are drawings of the head and the hand dated July 1978, which had the close enough comment from the former CIA employee referred to in case A6. Again, why not just have them draw it up for you? All right, here's attachment 3 and attachment 2, close enough. Close enough. Close enough encounters of the third kind, apparently. Well, that was quite an interesting little side quest, but what I've learned from that reading was that this section here that the authors tell us to hold on to our hats, they're not actually receiving this from some kind of supernatural, or I guess it's not supernatural, some sort of alien transmission of information from people that are piloting the vehicles. They're reading it in other sources. I think it is very interesting because so far, this link to UFO phenomenon is something that the authors have not liked. And in the advertisements for the meetings, they say this is not for us to discuss UFO phenomenon. We're talking about this religious concept that the people that you recognize as Yahweh and Jesus are actually just really old members of the kingdom of heaven, which is a physical place in some sort of alien location. And we are being piloted by members of that evolutionary species above human. So all of this, we're supposed to believe, has slowly come to T and Do because they are somehow intergalactically hooked up to this or these other entities in the kingdom of heaven. And instead, we're being told that the physical description of the individuals that occupy the next level above human, the next evolutionary level above human, as they like to call it, these descriptions come from somebody else. These descriptions come from that Leonard H. Stringfield individual. I mean, how much more of this is a fusion of the contemporary UFO excitement at the time? I mean, I knew some of it had to be connected, right? It has to be. But for them to just come out right and say it, Yeah, so part of this thing we believe was not revealed to us, but instead some other guy claims he talked to some other dudes, and then he wrote a book about it. And that's where we get our information. That is very interesting. Therefore, it seems you could not inherit one of the bodies until you no longer have any use for activities involving the reproductive organs. Now, that doesn't make any sense. Because once let's say your soul, once that is put into a body that doesn't have any reproductive organs, you're not going to have any of those urges anymore. Why do you need to get rid of the urges before you get the body? Being in the body gets rid of the urges. Those who think their heaven will have husbands and wives who wear seed-bearing plants for bodies must seed-bearing plants is a very interesting way for them to describe genitalia. For bodies must know of some other place than the heaven our heavenly Father exists in. I like how they say that sarcastically. Like, well, if you think that heaven is Kolob, then silly. This isn't silly, though. In the same way, they would also show no signs of digestive organs as humans know them. So, wouldn't it follow that it is important to have no likes or cravings for food, other than as fuel, if you hope to inherit a next level vehicle, body, or suit of clothes? No, it doesn't. It would follow that if your consciousness is put into one of those upgraded bodies, you will no longer have those cravings because those cravings are not connected to your consciousness. Those cravings are connected to your physical body. So if you change your physical body, those cravings don't exist anymore. I don't understand why they have to rid themselves of all desires connected to their human body so they can inherit a higher level body. That doesn't make any sense. All of the cravings of the human body are associated with the human body, not with the soul itself. Whatever you crave or haven't overcome at the loss of one body carries over at any point to the next body if the gardener chooses to replant you. But why? Why would it carry over? That is, the capacity of your new body will match the level of comprehension and control that you, the mind, achieved while occupying any previous body or vehicle. You will pick up where you left off, so to speak, with whatever programming or physical addictions you had not overcome. Do not confuse this with the popular concept of reincarnation. Okay, well, why not, first of all? But second of all, why? So let's say that you're addicted to alcohol. That has to do with a chemical situation in your brain, in your human body. So whether you're reincarnated into another human body or your soul is transported into a body that is in the next level above human, you would no longer have a brain that craves alcohol, a physical brain that has a physical connection or physical desire for alcohol. So why would you still have physical addictions associated with your soul if you have a different physical body? This makes absolutely no sense. I know it's one of those things where, oh, we're picking on this instead of the whole UFO cult thing doesn't make any sense, but this is really a core belief that they have. They live so separate from everybody because they were trying so hard to rid themselves of these human desires. But why? If you don't have a human body, you won't have any human desires. So this really doesn't make any sense. The student's constant desire is to move upward, always striving for a closer relationship with their older members, to be more like them in thought and action, and thus to be of the same mind. Quote, the son can do nothing on his own accord, but only what he sees the father doing. For whatever he does, the son does likewise. End quote. And this is from John 5:19. In trying to achieve this goal, they have found a most valuable instrument to be the constant use of a check partner. Check partners are individuals who share the same desires and goals, but between them there exists no physical or romantic relationship. As constant companions, they are always reaching for the most right action based on what they think their older members would have them do. Quote, for where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am in the midst of them, end quote. And this is from Matthew 18:20. That's an interesting interpretation of that verse. This was always described to me as why prayer is better in a group as opposed to an individual prayer. This applies to all ages of next level members. The older a member, the more he has mastered the technique of checking with the older member if this or that thought or action was one intended or handed down through the vine, trying to be sure that the thought or action wasn't a creation of his own or different from that of the older member. This is not from a loss of individuality, but from liberating the influences which separate us. Quote, "For I have come down from heaven, not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me," end quote, and that's also from John 6:38. In brackets, they add, "If any true religious scholars sincerely try to digest any of this strange puzzle, they may understand more of the real meaning of their studies." As was mentioned earlier, Doe recognized that T was clearly his older member. Not that T ever told him that, but it became quite obvious because of how much more natural the next level conduct and ways of thinking were to her. Also, it became clear to the class that T and Doe were their elders, older members, though they were not as aware of the gap between T and Doe as much as Doe was, and as Doe was sure that T was. The class also has recognized that during the course of our classroom, the concepts we believed in seemed to change almost as fast as our locations. However, we continued to believe that certain things consistently all along the way, mainly the rapid antiquating of our previous understanding. We knew that each step was an important stepping stone and gave us the perspective we needed to take at that time. We also clearly recognized the limitation and potential antiquation of our present understanding, though we know that it is sufficient for this moment. In other words, growth is a continual changing process. It says, "We are aware that some of this information is a real brain twister, and it takes a gestation period before comprehension. Frequently, at first exposure, it may provoke negative reactions. However, the true sons of God in line for membership will wade through the adjustment difficulties." That's a really long-winded way of saying that we thought things were true, and then we found out later we were wrong. And I think this is sort of a precursor to what eventually happens, where T and Doe are supposed to physically go to the next level, or the kingdom above, the kingdom of heaven. They're supposed to physically go with their students, and then T passes away before anybody. And suddenly they have to reconcile this with their beliefs. So it seems like they're pretty willing to throw away some of the beliefs that just don't pan out. When rising into the vernacular of this kind of thinking, it becomes difficult to maintain a cohesiveness of thought. The thoughts seem fragmented, or as little pieces of a larger picture that is difficult to bring into focus. That is because, at this moment, the reader is experiencing the mind of the older member, of the writer speaking through his instrument, i.e., brain and pen. However, in this case, the writer will not come out of some coma as channelers do, for the writer is consciously on the same wavelength as the father or older member who is coming through. The writer has just received instruction to switch back to more mundane information. Okay. Some may ask, how were those bodies affected which were entered by the next level minds of T and Doe and the class? If those individuals are still in the class, that is evidence that the genetic programming of the human vehicle has accepted or adapted to the thoughts and actions of the next level mind and now occupies and controls the vehicle. Well, that's a very convenient explanation, isn't it? How were those bodies affected? And they're just saying, well, if they believe it, that means, yeah. If a member of the next level wears a body like a suit of clothes, then he needs the strength to control and functionally use the genetic package of the suit of clothes he has reason to put on. Our understanding is that the next level bodies, the normal bodies for that kingdom level, in the same way that human bodies are the norm for the human kingdom. Let me try that again because of how this is kind of written. Our understanding is that next level bodies, and then in parentheses, the normal bodies for that kingdom level, in the same way human bodies are the norm for the human kingdom, end parentheses, are grown as plants from a vine, and that at the end of their gestation period, they are fully grown and functional, not babies, as are the products of human seed-bearing plants. They are seen to be an actual grafting process used and genetic binding from older members. I am the vine, ye are the branches. Could that mean something more than previously thought? When minds or souls are deliberately tuned to the same thinking and the same actions, think how well they could function in the service of the next level if they inherited like bodies of the same genetic vine with the same genetic programming. Here we are fragmenting again because the picture is so big and so difficult to focus. Well, maybe you should have asked the next level author to help you make a rough draft, an outline, something. Some 3.5 years ago from the time of this writing, T left her human vehicle. To all human appearances, it was due to a form of liver cancer. Oh, okay, so she had already passed away. We could say that because of the stress, due to the gap between her next level mind and the vehicle's genetic capacity, that the cancer symptom caused the vehicle to break down and stop functioning. However, it was strange that she experienced no symptoms prior to the week she left her vehicle, and for the most part, her vehicle slept through the transition. We're not exactly sure how many days it might have taken for her to return to the next level vehicle she left prior to this task. The more important fact is that since that time, Doe has been experiencing the role of having to communicate mentally with her, his older member, in a strengthening opportunity for mental or telepathic communication, not to be confused with the popular concept of channeling or spiritualism. The class has witnessed T's mind meshed in Doe's thinking and even his choice of words as he talks to them. Does the quote, "The Father is in me and I am in my Father," mean maybe a little more than we previously thought it might? So that is an interesting way they decide to explain what happened. That T and Doe were supposed to go with all of the students to the kingdom above, the kingdom of heaven, or the next evolutionary level above human, and they were supposed to physically go there together. But apparently, T happened, in all her infinite wisdom, to choose a body that was susceptible to liver cancer. Brilliant. I mean, how do they reconcile that? Is the Yahweh soul in the kingdom of heaven not omniscient? Did we cover that? It's fun that in the class they refer to this kind of thought expression, which has several strata of interpretation, as NL base, computer language, next level computer language, for it seems to take on a different level of meaning to those who have the same computer program or software. Is it possible that those who have like minds also share a same kind of implant, not unlike an advanced computer chip, and recognize the same language or basis for understanding? Quote, "You cannot come to the Father unless he draws you to him," end quote. Could that possibly mean that the next level has literally placed implants in the heads of some humans for different purposes? What do we mean literally placed? You cannot come to the Father unless he draws you to him. Where do you get the idea of the literal placement of head implants? What? What? I mean, what a you're interpreting the verse, okay, fine. But to say this is a literal interpretation, no. This is probably not the right word for it. One purpose might be to draw the chosen to him, for they are looking to the right source with the right asking or prayers. What has the class been doing for 12 years, you might ask? They have been tuning their minds with their older member's mind, who has been tuning his mind with his older member's mind, and so forth up the ladder. They have been progressively gaining more control over the genetic programming of their vehicles, and in so doing, have been automatically putting those signals into the atmosphere for others to draw upon. Evidence of the successful depositing of these signals comes in the form of the public's increased awareness of the harm that smoking, drinking, drugs, and sexual promiscuity can do to the chemistry of the human body. Additional evidence may be found in the increased awareness of the physical nature of the kingdom of heaven, UFOs, next level bodies, recovered alien or extraterrestrial bodies, etc. The class also feels that they have a more complete understanding of Lucifer, how he got to be too big for his britches, stopped looking for his heavenly father, and thought that he knew so much that he could run his own show. They are witnesses to how Lucifer's helpers try in spirit to influence individuals to go backward and thereby remain his faithful servants. One of the major tools of Lucifer is the New Age movement, i.e., theosophy, ascended masters, channeling, Eastern religions, mysticism, yoga, Christ consciousness within, and the ye are gods concept. These practices and beliefs originated from Lucifer. They are his creations or distortions. All are a fantasy and a trap, though spiritually and intellectually intriguing and enticing. Some New Age teachings purport that Jesus is one of many ascended masters, and they don't even try to make you feel ignorant if you don't recognize Jesus as part of their hierarchy. They teach that he studied in the Himalayan mountains with a hierarchy from age 12 to 30, for the years of which there are no significant records of his actions. If there is an ounce of truth to that claim, it might explain why Matthew has recorded in 4:8 through 9. Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and the glory of them, and said to him, "All these I will give you if you fall down and worship me." Jesus knew that this was not his heavenly Father. How would Jesus have known where the real truth was to be found if he hadn't been confronted with and been strong enough to see through what Lucifer had to offer? In the same way, T and Do were similarly tempted by the forces of Lucifer when in the early stages of their awakening. They were drawn to their study of theosophy with its teachings of the Ascended Masters, Blavatsky's materials, and Mahatma's letters. On more than one occasion, T and Do were offered the trap of positions of leadership and power in Lucy's camp. Again with the Lucy. Why we kept calling him Lucifer? Why are we calling him Lucy? One of which occurred atop what most New Agers consider the highest spiritual mountains in the U.S. Well, where is that? Does it say where it is? I don't see where it says. Where are the highest spiritual mountains? Is it Mount Shasta? Some who consider themselves the hierarchy of that spiritual community told them, "You're the ones that we've been looking for to be our leaders." T and Do recognized, just as Jesus did, that this was a ploy of Satan. It did not come from their heavenly Father. For us, the lesson gleaned from both these experiences is that it's not what you get into that matters, but what you get out of. Learning from your mistakes is what develops discernment, wisdom, depth, and maturity. It is therefore ignorant to condemn individuals for what they have done in the past if they learned from their mistakes, changed, and took a step higher from the ladder toward our Heavenly Father's truth. One of the greatest temptations that Do and members of the class as individuals have had to deal with is the feeling of failure or not measuring up to the potential of their task. However, they repeatedly recovered on the basis that whatever they might have appraised as a mistake can be reappraised as a lesson, hopefully learned, not needing to be repeated. They know that the next level, the kingdom of God, always knows how to use what might have appeared as a major negative or a mistake and change it into a positive or forward step of even greater magnitude. So that's how they describe it. Anytime they make a huge mistake in their prophecy, their belief system, anything, they just say, "Oh, it's just a hiccup and we'll learn from it." Now, I don't know why the next level keeps giving them bad information. It's a very weird way to teach them something, but I guess letting them continually reassess is the way the next level works. Another one of Lucy's tactics is to keep us all so preoccupied with our human endeavors or concepts, including our tainted religious concepts, so that we do not have the eyes to see or the ears to hear when our true Heavenly Father comes. Although the truth was designed to be found in the Judeo-Christian scriptures, Lucifer has worked equally hard to get the Christians off track by perverting their interpretations, concepts, and practices. Right, but your interpretation, concepts, and practices have not been perverted. The church uses the family, church membership, baptism, and other rituals to give a false sense of security in religious accomplishment and misguides them to believe that this is all that they need to do in order to enter the kingdom of heaven. Okay, so can't that be said of your group as well? We all know the words too well. He gave us the gift, he paid the price, all we have to do is believe in him. However, Jesus' admonition to his disciples was quite another story. Lucifer keeps humans so preoccupied with the family, normal for human seed-bearing plants, except when the close of a civilization is near and or when individuals are being drawn closer to the next level, that it becomes almost impossible for individuals who are prospects for moving up to respond when their Heavenly Father finds the time is ripe to draw them to him. In other words, the people that ditched their kids, they were on the right track. When the time is at hand, no couples can respond, only individuals who seek only their Heavenly Father, knowing that He is all that is sufficient for their every need. Well, except the need to know information correctly the first time. Okay, so their Heavenly Father is in some sense, omniscient and omnipotent, except he keeps giving them wrong information. The individual who really recognizes his heavenly Father doesn't even have the desire to share his heart, soul, and mind with anyone else. Needless to say, he is celibate in all ways, not simply in his sensuous nature. If at their heavenly Father's calling, individuals cannot respond to him because of their worldly desires of their hearts, bodies, or minds, they will be unable to move up closer to him and out of the darkness of their ignorance. We know this sounds like a warped, spacey evangelism, but there seems to be no other way to say it. We are quite aware that some of Lucifer's helpers are perched to point the finger at us as the Antichrist because we are here to expose him. One of Lucy's favorite tricks is to use the mouths of Christians as well as other awareness groups to point the finger at others as Satan, as if they interfere with the concepts or behaviors that he wants them to cling to. I mean, that's, again, a very convenient out. The only reason you make fun of us is because the devil has brainwashed you. However, the Bible makes its stand on marriage and family in the final days very clear. So here we're going to have some quotes from 1 Corinthians and from Luke. 1 Corinthians 7:29. I mean, brethren, the appointed time has grown very short. From now on, let those who have wives live as though they had none. 1 Corinthians 7:32-35. The unmarried man is anxious about the affairs of the Lord, how to please the Lord. But the married man is anxious about the worldly affairs, how to please his wife, and his interests are divided. And the unmarried woman or girl is anxious about the affairs of the Lord, how to be holy in body and spirit. But the married woman is anxious about worldly affairs, how to please her husband. I say this for your own benefit, and to secure your undivided devotion to the Lord. We also talked in the past about how Paul comes across as an incel. Luke 21:23. But woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. T and Doe's students know that now, because of the times, they must speak out with what they have come to know so as to assist those who want to move up. I do bring us back to T's kids. They were abandoned by their mother, who died among this group of UFO cult members, thinking that it was the right thing. I don't know. How would that make you feel? I feel like if I think my mom really believed it, that she really thought that she was doing the right thing, it would make it a little bit easier, you know? It wasn't that we were worth rejecting as her children. It was that for whatever reason, she came to this conclusion that the only way to get into heaven for her or for any of us is to completely abandon all connections with the world. I don't think it would make it easy, but I think it would make it easier to accept what happened. As we said before, we have tried again and again to deny this seemingly bizarre information. Each time, after thorough examination, we couldn't deny what we've come to know, and we had to return to the same ladder in our thinking, but this time to the next rung. Could this possibly be because we had been briefed aboard a spacecraft before coming, and have gone through a gradual awakening to what was already in our minds? I mean, that's one way to think about it. Why else did T and Doe and the class know that the bodies of the next level members do not have reproductive and digestive systems before they were aware of materials such as the Roswell incident and UFO crash at Aztec? Likely because this is a reformatted memory. It's something that they heard and forgot that they heard about. That's called source amnesia. So you can have this thought that you think is your own, but you actually heard it from somewhere else. So there's other explanations for this. Pretty mundane explanations for this. Why was it that at the start of the classroom, T and Doe talked about the next level having underground bases from which spacecraft come and go, and that the next level might even engage in humans to assist them with various projects? I don't know. Why? When did you prove that was true? Why did T and Doe, even in the early classroom, constantly say, you've got to get your mind into your vehicle and get control of it? I mean, this idea that we're souls piloting a physical body, this is nothing new. Years ago, we were holding meetings and telling about the real physical level of existence above the human kingdom and about its physical occupants. This same information, which is coming out now as a result of above top secret government leaks, substantiates what we knew in the beginning. No, it doesn't. Where does this substantiate it? Explain. This comes to a point in our own awakening when we no longer have the need for substantiation. Well, that's convenient. That really does remind me of that Frank and Norm book where it says, well, so because we think some of these things are true in the Bible, everything else in the Bible has to be true. I mean, once we've established that two things might be true, obviously the whole thing's true, right? And then any of it that doesn't seem true, well, we just have to understand it in a different way. And that is not a cop out or special pleading because that's really what this is sounding like. I mean, not that big of a surprise that it sounds like the same religious nonsense that other people come out with. In our overcoming, no proof that would ever satisfy the scientific community was offered. No spacecraft landed in our backyard. But through the nurturing of faith, we came to know the reality of the next level and that T and Do are our older members. So it's talking about the same information which comes out as government leaks, etc. That's evidence. But also we don't have any evidence. Okay. Likewise, for graduation, candidates require proof or to prerequisite their acceptance of the reality of the next level on that basis is wasted effort. If any judgment can be made, it would have to be made only as before, that is, quote, by their fruits ye shall know them, Matthew 7:20, assuming you've grown to recognize good fruit. One example of the faith syndrome might be seen in relationship to Whitley Strieber's experiences. Since as yet his visitors have not offered him proof incontrovertible, that fact likely indicates that he is still candidate material. But for non-candidates of the heavenly kingdom, faith is, for the most part, not a requirement for incontrovertible proof to be shown, for they are not building a relationship, nor are they going anywhere. That's, again, also a very convenient cop-out. Well, if you don't see any evidence, it's because you're not connected like we are. It's kind of like the same thing you hear from Christians that they say, well, because we're connected to Jesus, we know his works when we see it. So it might seem like a coincidence, but really we know it's a sign that Jesus answered my prayer. Though candidates early on are denied the proof of their relationship with the next level, once faith has been sufficiently proven, then proof of the next level's existence may be given. This is not to say that all who have what they might consider incontrovertible proof are not necessarily candidates. We would certainly like to believe that out of those who witnessed the recent Gulf Breeze, Florida incident, that at least some of them might recognize it as a part of the workings of their Heavenly Father's kingdom. One of the reasons for the class's resurfacing at this time seems to be as follows. Information has been released or leaked about the UFO's occupants, crashes, and communication between aliens and humans that, because of misinterpretations, could turn your eyes or have you see this as evidence of something other than the workings of our Father's kingdom. Humans, with very few exceptions, who have awareness of the presence of these aliens, haven't grown to the capacity to see that the kingdom of God is at work here. So basically, all this UFO stuff that's going on, we have to explain it to you. This is actually heavenly workings. This is not random UFO stuff. It's not aliens like they're telling you. It's aliens like we're telling you. Governments who have had an undeniable awareness of the aliens' presence here since the late 1940s have tried to cover it up. And these are in some references: the Roswell incident, UFO crash at Aztec, and UFO crashes part 4, and the same book later on we're going to be referred to, except no, it's the same book. Yeah, report number 2. They have retrieved crashed spacecrafts, live EBEs or extraterrestrials, and numerous bodies, autopsies of which have revealed characteristics mentioned previously, even though investigators interpret these occurrences incorrectly. That's bizarre. I mean, it's referencing what we read, and how is that interpreted in a way that doesn't align with what they're saying? That they weren't grown on a vine? I mean, what? We, the class, certainly don't care to force the disclosure of the cover up. The next level had its own cover up, so to speak, since the civilization began for humans' sake because the younger plants, humans, want to be able to handle the unreligiousized reality of some of their doings. There are records of how, in biblical times, hordes of angels came and won this battle, or did this or that act, actual close encounters of the third kind. However, the next level's presence hasn't been noticed for many generations until recently, i.e., in increasingly significant ways since the 1940s. If you are part of God's children, you know that the next level has their reasons for their leaks or exposure in preparation for a broader acceptance and understanding of them. However, because of their exposure, Lucifer's counterinterpretation of this presence has been stepped up. There is a major movement afoot to depict the members of the next level as hostile space aliens who abduct humans, do them harm, and are really here to eat humans, believe it or not, a quote from a so-called reliable source. Alas, our major dilemma, this is in all caps, what to do with what we know? For a while, we tried to use what we had learned in an attempt to help victims of problematic genetic programming. We briefly started what was called Anonymous Sexaholics Celibate Church, aimed at people who had already joined a sexaholics type organization. We tried to show them the positive side of their problem, that to be liberated from that addiction, having already acknowledged that they were addicts, put them ahead of the pack as far as having the potential for an improved relationship with their Heavenly Father was concerned. We didn't expose other knowledge that we had, only that what we had learned as related to overcoming of a sex addiction. Never anything about UFOs or next level awareness. We simply tried to help them understand that life after addiction acknowledgement could be a much happier, more fulfilling, and significantly more liberating existence, particularly if they could establish a dependency relationship with their Heavenly Father in whatever vernacular that translated for them. So it sounds kind of like a 12-step program in a lot of ways. This was done in a way similar to the Sexaholics and Alcoholics Anonymous approach, except it offered them a more godly focused fellowship. Okay, so it is that obvious. We spent a lot of time and money on planning, brochures, mailings, and talking at meetings and conventions. However, the response to us was almost one of resentment of our finding joy after celibacy, as if we were trying to show off or be self-righteous. We considered and presented ourselves as addicts, but our lack of ability at faking doldrums seemed to cause some to question our humility. It was as if we were supposed to remain in a poor us or sick syndrome, or otherwise be misunderstood. In this instance, we couldn't really tell them where we were coming from. Well, I mean, come on. These are people who I'm assuming they joined this sexaholics type organization because their compulsion to have sex has caused them harm in some demonstrable way. Harm to relationships, harm to their jobs, harm to their body. Maybe they got some kind of disease or something. And these are people that just won't stop. Maybe it put them in really dangerous situations. Maybe some of them were almost killed. Maybe some of them were robbed. I mean, these are people who have a problem. And you're trying to say, oh, yeah, I also got the tinglies in my jinglies sometimes. So we're the same. I'm also addicted to sex because sometimes when I wake up, I've got morning wood. Sometimes when I have a dream, my underwear is wet when I wake up. So I'm also addicted to sex, you see. I think that those those folk in the sexaholics type organization would have every reason to be really mad at this very religious push of, oh yeah, me too, me too. I also had that same addiction as you did, but you know how I overcame it? Heavenly Father. Let me show you all about the Heavenly Father. I mean, this just smacks of, honestly, any pastor that claims they had some. I mean, there's so many pastors, right, that claim they had these terribly sinful lives. There's these awful addictions, etc. And then one day they found God, and everything just fell into place, only to find out that, they smoked cigarettes a couple times. And that's what they're saying is their terrible drug addiction. We also thought that we could help AIDS victims realize that their problem could actually be their blessing. I mean, just when you thought it couldn't get any more dismissive, just when you thought it couldn't get any more run-of-the-mill Christian cult, they just upped the ante about AIDS can be a blessing. I couldn't even finish that sentence, so let's try again. We also thought that we could help AIDS victims realize that their problem could actually be their blessing, if they could be thankful for the opportunity to come closer to their Heavenly Father during this period of suffering. Wow. Wow. I mean, again, if that doesn't sound like just any run-of-the-mill evangelical BS, right? It's actually a good thing if anything that's bad happens to you, if that makes you come closer to Jesus, and it's actually good, you know. This was actually something that I remember when I shared 10 years ago about my sister's passing. There was a Christian who kept just spamming the same kind of thing on every one of my videos about how this death of my sister was an opportunity for me to come back to Jesus, because wouldn't I want to see my sister one day in heaven again? So this is really an opportunity. Now, I never explained how my sister had passed, and I'm not going to get into that here. But the suggestion, I think, to any sibling, any family member, that they lost a family member, a younger family member, at all, because God is trying to bring you back to Him, is just inherently ridiculous and also offensive. But the way through which my sister lost her life, and again, I'm not going to get into it, but I'm find myself, my mind drifting to suggest that is a way for God to try to get closer to me. That must be some sick God. That must be some twisted God to try to get closer to somebody by murdering their family member, whether it's through violence, whether it's through an accident, whether it's through an overdose, whether it's through cancer or some other sickness like AIDS. That is the act of the divine murdering your family member to try to twist you emotionally to come back to them. And that's what these guys are doing. I when we were going through the earlier parts of the book, it was like, oh, haha, interesting. Now this has just gone to Christian stupidity, Christian evil. We have done our homework mentally in this effort, but haven't yet found the physical opportunity to put much into motion. Again, this is in all caps. What are we to do with what we have learned? Well, not that. Author of this 88 update, not this. When we were holding meetings 12 years ago and didn't even know much of anything about what we were doing, you got that damn right. Didn't know anything about what you were doing. We were criticized by what seemed to be almost every camp. Psychologists wrote papers and books and even articles in Psychology Today about our unfortunate brainwashed syndrome. But from our standpoint, we felt like our brains weren't yet washed clean enough. They really didn't know us. Well, they don't have to know you. I mean, that would help, right? But they do have to know humans and how they tend to think. Ministers wrote articles and books and newsletters about how selfish and self-perfecting our self-perfecting syndrome was, overlooking Matthew 5:48, quote, "Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect," end quote. They hastily surmised that we were on an ego perfection trip. Our motivation for trying to overcome everything that separated us from the next level was based on humility, and that's what we felt. feeling that we had done nothing to deserve the honor of the next level's closeness, and in spite of that fact, the next level had chosen to draw us closer to them. An awareness of that gift compelled us and also gave us the strength needed to try to rid ourselves of everything that separated us from their kingdom. Again, they never knew us, having never even sat with us. I don't know, could that be because the only time you tried to communicate with them was with these weird cryptic notes that you left on the pulpit in closed churches and ran off before anybody saw you or could ask you questions? Maybe that's why they've never talked to you. Like, you do everything possible to be as elusive as possible and then say, how could they say anything about us? They don't even know us. Well, you're not giving anybody a chance to know you. Ufologists said that we must not know anything about the world of spacecrafts because we had used the term UFO, and what they knew of what we stood for seemed too spiritual. What? So because they use the term UFO to help the average person understand that they're talking about spacecrafts, the ufologists were like, oh, that doesn't work because you're talking about God, not UFOs? Okay. However, the ones who misunderstood us the most were the ones who interpreted our position as bypassing Jesus, never understanding that without that same mind that abides in him, we would be nothing. We believe in the reality of God, his kingdom, and his son, Jesus Christ. But why? Again, why is this all predicated on Judeo-Christian biblical ideas? Where did this come from? It comes from the fact that Bonnie Nettles and Marshall Applewhite were both Christians. And then they just had some interesting side thoughts. And for whatever reason, probably due to their upbringing, they couldn't divorce the concept of their upbringing's religion. I mean, that's why Marshall Applewhite hated himself so much. He hated himself because he was gay. And according to his flavor of Christianity, that was a detestable thing to be. This drives him eventually to cut off his own genitals. That's how strongly he believed this stuff. Can you imagine how much more content he would have been if he would have just left Christianity instead of mutated it further? He certainly wouldn't have taken anybody else along with him. If he just would have said, you know what, I'm not a bad dude, and if somebody tells me that I'm bad just because of who I am and who I love, then those people are, they don't know me. Something? He could have had that thought. I don't know. I mean, there's even Christians that accept members of the LGBT community. Couldn't do that. Nope. Had to become connected to Jesus in UFO form. Yeah, that's the reality. If we are off track in any way, we want it rectified. If we are some well-meaning, misguided, charismatic cult that is full of baloney, we want that rectified. However, if we are in fact in his service, we want that service brought to its full fruition according to God's will. Like the fruition that T and Do were supposed to go with the whole class to the kingdom of heaven, but instead T passed away long before the rest of the group. That's God's will. We want only what's right in his eyes. Again, in all caps, what are we to do with what we know? The one thing we seem to be good at is attracting those to us who would mock us, misinterpret us, and wish that we would go away. They not only find fault in everything that we did and do, but make up things to accuse us of. No, I think you guys, you're bad enough as it is. Maybe this is what we are supposed to expect at this point in our development toward our older member. We're not really the martyr type, but so be it if it's his will, part of his design. This is making them martyrs. Do they know what a martyr is? It's not somebody saying, ha ha, space alien, Jesus. That's not what a martyr is. But again, they also thought just saying, hey, as a regular human, I also have sexual urges on occasion, therefore I'm a sexaholic. So they're not really into following words for what they mean. Here's hoping our efforts have not been in vain. We feel that it is our instruction from our Father's kingdom to get this material out at this time. Maybe, just maybe, there are some who can benefit from it. If not now, then possibly in some future time. If you want to help us get this material out intact, far and wide, please do. Well, apparently I'm helping with that. So you're welcome. And then also, hey, maybe you guys are benefiting from it right now. So that was quite a long read, and I did not expect to be that emotional about it at the end. I just expected, this is whatever. This is a cult and it's a thing, and they're otherwise not really harming people. Yes, they harm themselves, but they all seem to consent to it for, for whatever you consider that. To what extent is it manipulation? To what extent is it a person consenting? It just seemed to be a bunch of adults who believed the thing, and that's it. But now seeing that they went to go bother AIDS patients to tell them that this is actually a blessing in disguise because you can get closer to alien Jesus. Just imagine trying to deal with everything. Not only with AIDS, but even back when it was known as GRID. That other people are telling you this is what you deserve for being gay. That you deserve this. And that you're going to die and you're going to go to hell. And that these people show up and they say, as long as you come to Space Jesus, everything's actually okay. The fact that your life is going to be cut drastically short. The fact that perhaps even your family has abandoned you. The fact that nobody seems to be putting any effort into trying to figure out what this is or why people are getting it because they're happy that gay people are dying. It actually could be a blessing if you stop being gay and then just come to Jesus. The alien Jesus, the real one in the UFO that's going to come pick us up. How just pissed off in a bizarre way. Like, you couldn't even be directly mad. You'd have to be offended, and then like with a side of just amusement in such a bizarre way, like a combination of being mad and tickled, because the thing they're saying is so outrageous. You can't really be that mad at it, but it is also very offensive because you're busy trying to manage your, like, the fact that you're dying. You're trying to manage any relationships that were lost. You're trying to manage your affairs. And then these space alien Jesus guys come in. Not regular Jesus guys, but space alien Jesus guys come into your hospital room and tell you that Space Jesus is reaching out to you through this tough time. I wonder how many patients they pissed off versus how many patients they made laugh. I hope they made more laugh. I do. Because I think when you're in that dire of a situation, any joy from any source in any way is a valuable thing. And so I hope that what they had to say was just so ridiculous that it caused more people to laugh than it caused them to yell. Absolutely ridiculous. And even the sexaholic issue, again, being a sexaholic, this is something that's going to cause severe disruptions to your daily life. And again, it can cause you bodily harm, such as STDs, such as the HIV virus that causes AIDS. And to say, oh yeah, me too, buddy, we're both in the same boat, because I sometimes get a jingle in my bingles. That ridiculous, so ridiculous. I mean, it's like imagine going to like a Narcotics Anonymous, and then you get somebody there who's like, yeah, I'm just really, really addicted to sugar. It reminds me of what was that movie? And Bob Saget played a character, and he yelled about, oh, being addicted to marijuana, that's nothing. And he said something like, you ever suck dick for weed? No. Cocaine, that's a real addiction. I feel like that just kept playing in my head reading this. Anyway, with all that being said, I thank you for joining me for this long video. And if you have stayed here for this long, I would appreciate a what kind of emojis can we use for this time? How about UFO and like a medicine pill? How about that? Because we're supposed to be healed by coming to Space Jesus. Yeah. With that being said, if you guys would like to support the channel, you can be a cult member either here on YouTube or on Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you get access to just different kinds of posts that I make throughout the month, and also our live stream that we have. It's a live cult meeting that we have once a month, and we don't get into anything deep. It's just sort of a way for everyone to decompress from the month and to get away from all of the problems with work and politics and everything. And we just do some fun stuff like watch Superbook videos and laugh. So it's a good time, and it's a nice break from the drudgery and frustrations of the month. So anyway, guys, as always, thanks for listening.
If you're ready for next level, there is no other time. Join us on a spaceship, leave this world behind. Make sure you are ready, make sure you say goodbye. We'll see you in the kingdom, there is no need to cry. It's time for the countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7. It's time to take the drink. 6, 5, 3. Tie the bag over your head. 1, lift off after your barbiturates. It's time for the countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7. It's time to take the drink. 6, 5, 3. Tie the bag over your head. 1, lift off after your barbiturates. Let's go. We've sent out all the flyers, done our interviews. You've read all about us, you've seen us on the news. If you heed our calling, if you feel it in your heart, then come before it's too late. We shall never part. It's time for the countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7. It's time to take the drink. 6, 5, 4. Tie the bag over your head. 2, 1, lift off after your bar retreat. Let's go. It's time for the countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7. It's time to take the drink. 6, 5, 4. Tie the bag over your head. 2, 1, lift off after your bar retreat. Let's go. If you wanna see clearly, if you wanna see the sun, then drink the lemonade, and I will be done.